At my sister's promotion party, my father raised a toast and said, "Now this is what a Carter looks like in uniform." Everyone clapped, laughed, and I stood 5 feet away, holding a tray of lemonade in black slacks and a gray blouse like the help. I hadn't been invited. I showed up anyway. My name wasn't on the slideshow. My presence wasn't acknowledged. My own aunt told a neighbor I had left the military in disgrace. She didn't know I heard her, but I did. I always do. At one point, someone spilled wine, and guess who they asked to clean at me? My father barely looked at me. He didn't ask about my life, my work, my health. He just muttered, still wondering, huh, then walked away. That night, I sat outside on a folding chair by the propane grill, watching everyone eat inside under the glow of Emily's medals. I told myself I didn't care, that I had moved on. But it stung. God, it stung. 3 weeks later, at Fort Benning, I was asked to observe a training drill. I wore a plain cap and kept my distance until my father's old drill sergeant John Brooks spotted me from across the bleachers. He stared, took off his cap, and said loudly, "General, ma'am, I've seen you on the Pentagon's top command list." The room went silent. All eyes turned to me, and for the first time in 7 years, my name spoke louder than his silence. "Hi, I'm Sarah Carter, and this is a story of what happens when the girl they discarded turned out to be the one running the room." Before I share my story, I want to know you're here with me. Just say, "listening" in the comments, or tell me where you're watching from. It helps more than you think. And if you've ever felt invisible like I did that day, subscribe. Because some stories deserve to be heard. Thank you. And now, here's mine. My sister's promotion party was held at our parents' house in Columbus, Ohio. It was a full military-themed event, dressed in red, white, and blue. There were small American flags in the flower arrangements and a slideshow of Emily's photos, her at basic training saluting, standing straight, in full uniform, with shiny pins catching the light. 30 or so guests filled the house. Family old neighbors, Dad's retired Army buddies. Everyone knew their role. Celebrate Emily Carter, First Lieutenant Pride of the Carter family. I arrived on time, dressed in black slacks and a long-sleeved gray blouse. My hair was pulled back tight, no makeup. I knew better than to draw attention. I wasn't on the guest list, but no one stopped me. My father, Robert Carter, retired colonel, looked up when I walked in and gave me a slow nod, the kind you give someone you're trying to forget. No words, no welcome. A few minutes in, as Dad was pouring bourbon for his old unit commander, he asked casually, "So, what's Sarah up to these days?" Diane, Mom's sister, answered for me. "Oh, she's between things, still figuring life out." Her smile was sweet. Her voice wasn't. Everyone nodded, like that was normal. I stood there, holding a plate, pretending not to exist. Then came the commands. "Sarah, could you grab some extra cups? We're out of napkins. Can you get those from the garage?" I did everything they asked. No one said thank you. No one asked if I wanted a drink or a seat. I didn't get a seat. When I returned from the kitchen, the living room was full. My mother looked up and said, "Why don't you sit outside for a bit, sweetie?" Like it was some gentle offer. I stepped out onto the back patio. Alone. One folding chair waited next to the propane grill, where the gas hissed steadily, heat rippling up into the air. It smelled like oil and aluminum. I sat there watching everyone else through the sliding glass doors as they laughed under the glow of Emily's medals on the wall. There wasn't a single picture of me in the slideshow. Not one from West Point, not even from childhood. I shouldn't have been surprised. In this family, I'd been cast as the cautionary tale, the one who could have been something if only she hadn't messed up. My father had declared me a failure the day I left West Point. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He just said, You were never meant to lead, and you never will. Not with your name. Then he walked away, and that sentence followed me like a shadow for years. I sat there by the grill, invisible, inhaling gas fumes while they toasted my sister inside. And then my phone buzzed. A single message. Eclipse 4, Fort Benning, observation, 1400 HRs 15. I stared at the screen for a long time. No one knew I still served. No one ever asked. 7 years ago, back at West Point, I made a decision that changed everything. It was a night training exercise, high pressure, live scenario, full gear. Our GPS system glitched mid-operation. 3 cadets on my squad went missing in dense woods near the bluff. The protocol was to hold position and wait for command. But I couldn't do that. Not while 3 people were possibly bleeding out alone in the dark. So, I made the call, took 2 cadets with me, split from the main route, and hiked the ravine in total blackout. We found them near a collapsed path. Dazed, one of them with a dislocated shoulder. We pulled him out and radioed in coordinates. They survived. But I broke the chain of command to save him, and that was unforgivable. My commanding officer was humiliated, his operation exposed. And my father, who at the time was serving as an institutional advisor to West Point, took matters into his own hands. He quietly adjusted the incident report, shifted blame from the system to me. I was listed as non-compliant, unfit for field command. I was given the option to withdraw for personal reasons. I didn't argue. I packed my things. My father stopped me at the curb, handed me a manila envelope, and said, "Sarah, you don't have the temperament to lead. You were born for rules, not command," and that was it. His verdict. My sentence. But what no one knew, not even him, was that I never stopped serving. Weeks later, I was quietly recruited into a strategic intelligence unit. Black Ops adjacent, highly classified. My name was erased from the usual chain of command, and my new career began under complete encryption. I worked in silence. Oversight operations, system leak detection, high clearance data mapping. I became invisible officially. Then last year, during a breach investigation at a military contractor facility in San Antonio, I was ambushed, shot in the left shoulder. I spent 17 days off-grid undergoing recovery and debrief. When I returned home for the holidays, my arm was still bandaged. No one asked why, not even my mother. At dinner, my aunt commented on how pale I looked. I told her it was the lighting. The scar's still there. A hard line near my collarbone. It's more than a mark. It's proof that I've bled for a country that never bothered to know my name again. Proof that I kept going, even after my own father buried me alive in silence. In my apartment, locked inside a secure safe, sits the original report from that night at West Point, the unedited version, the one that showed I did everything right, the one that said, "Live Save 3, risk level high, justification commander's discretion exercised in field." I've never used it, never needed to. But maybe that's changing. Because Fort Benning isn't just another assignment. It's where my father built his legacy, and now I'm going back there not to follow orders, but to write the truth back into the ground where he tried to erase me. I arrived at Fort Benning under a false name and a shielded assignment. To them, I was just another observer. My clearance credentials were routed through 3 layers of encrypted access and routed again through the Joint Strategic Command's shadow network. No one on the base knew who I was. That was the point. The drill was set up for optics. A training exercise dressed up to impress the internal media units, the kind of thing meant to showcase procedural excellence and highlight rise stars. But I saw the cracks almost immediately. Command structure lagged by seconds on every order. Communications overlap between fire team leaders wasn't syncing. Too many eyes looking at too many maps, not enough instinct. It was all form, no function. I sat alone near the top of the bleachers, tapping notes into my secure tablet. The heat was brutal that day, bouncing off the concrete parade grounds in waves. Cadets marched and barked out calls, unaware that someone was documenting everything they missed. Then I heard a pair of boots shuffle to a stop behind me. General Ma'am. The voice didn't just recognize me, it named me. I turned slowly, and standing 5 steps below was an older man in fatigues. Stocky weathered his cap tucked under one arm. John Brooks. He'd been my father's drill sergeant decades ago. I remembered him only from photographs, black and white snapshots in dusty frames. But now, he was real, staring at me with disbelief that edged into awe. "I've seen your name," he said, "on a top command list out to the Pentagon. Sarah Carter. You're her." His voice was loud enough to cut the air. Several heads turned. I felt it immediately, the shift in atmosphere, the eyes trying to process what they'd just heard. I didn't say anything. I didn't smile or deny it. I only nodded. Once. And that was enough. Whispers followed me down the steps as I left. I didn't look back, but I knew. The stone had been dropped in still water, and the ripples would travel fast. Emily was down on the field. I hadn't realized until I was almost at the base of the bleachers. She had stopped mid-stride, looking straight up toward where Brooks had called out. Her face was unreadable. Not confused, not exactly angry, just alert. Later that evening, I was in a temporary coordination office on the east wing of the base, cleared for one-time use. A small desk, no personal touches. Just files and a locked monitor terminal. Someone knocked. The door opened slowly, and Emily stepped inside. She didn't sit. "Sergeant Brooks," she said quietly. "He recognized you. Is he mistaken?" I didn't answer at first. I closed the folder I'd been working on and met her eyes. There was a flicker of something in them. Curiosity, suspicion, maybe both. "Do you think he's mistaken?" I said. Emily didn't respond. She stood still for a few seconds as if trying to hear something behind my words. Then she nodded once, like she understood something she didn't want to understand. She left without another word. I watched the door close behind her. Sometimes, silence is the loudest response a person can give. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the narrow cot the base had issued me and stared at the digital padlock on my encrypted drive. There it was, my name, buried deep beneath years of secrecy, finally brushing the surface. But I couldn't stop thinking about her face. Emily had grown into someone sharp. She read between lines. And I had just handed her the start of a puzzle I wasn't sure she'd survive finishing. 2 months earlier, when Emily graduated officer school, I sent her a gift. Nothing flashy, just a weathered military notebook from my old trunk. She always liked vintage things. But I had placed something inside its back cover. A disc. Encrypted, keyed to a binary sequence only she could access if she knew to combine her full name with our old West Point area code. I didn't expect her to notice. I didn't expect her to even care. But she had. Sometime after Brooks' public recognition, she must have started digging. I don't know what pushed her. Maybe the look on my face, or something. Someone said afterward. But within 48 hours, she'd tried to access the disk, and she triggered the trap. A ghost node embedded by James Porter, one of the few software specialists I trusted, sprang to life the moment she entered the wrong sequence. It didn't shut down the system. It rang a silent alarm. Her account was suspended for 24 hours. Internal Affairs notified her superior officers, but didn't escalate. She hadn't gotten far, just far enough to touch the edge of what I'd buried. She found me the next night in the maintenance shed near the vehicle depot. It was the only place on base that wasn't under constant camera surveillance. Metal walls, the smell of oil and grease. Perfect for conversations that weren't meant to exist. She came in, holding the notebook in one hand, the disk in the other. I need to know why, she said. Why give me this? Why not just talk to me like a normal person? I looked at her. Really looked. She wasn't the same girl from our childhood anymore. She stood straighter, spoke sharper. But I could tell she still didn't know where her loyalty belonged. I wanted you to decide, I said. Not just listen. Not just believe what you were told. I keyed in my access code on the encrypted terminal mounted in the back. The screen blinked to life. I pulled up the old report logs, archived off-network, impossible to trace through regular base access. There it was, the record from West Point. A scanned version of the original report annotated by timestamps and user logs. One edit, logged under user 442 alpha. My father's old clearance ID. 3 lines inserted, just 3, enough to redirect the narrative. Enough to paint me as a reckless cadet who had compromised safety protocol even after saving 3 lives. That was all it took. Emily stared at the screen. Her expression didn't change, but her breathing did. "He told me you panicked," she whispered. "He said you ignored orders and endangered others." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. She reached out and touched the corner of the screen as if checking to see if it was real. He let me believe that she said more to herself than to me. He let me go on thinking, "You were." I still didn't speak. The silence was enough. Emily closed the notebook. She didn't ask for more. She didn't throw it back at me or demand answers. She just looked down at the disk in her palm, then back up at me. For a moment, I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen in years, something between grief and realization. She left the shed without saying goodbye. The door swung closed behind her with a soft metallic click. I stayed there alone in the dim light, surrounded by the smell of rust and diesel, feeling more exposed than I had in a long time. She had seen it now. Not all of it, but enough. Enough to make her question the man she'd believed in. Enough to make her look at me without the old contempt. I didn't know if she would stand beside me, but I knew she would never see our father the same way again. I returned to Fort Benning 3 days later, not because I wanted to, but because protocol required I finalize the after-action report. My temporary clearance was still valid, though I had a feeling it wouldn't be for much longer. The base was unusually busy that week. Military guests flew in from Virginia and Kentucky, and there were whispers of some kind of morale initiative tied to heritage leadership. I stayed in the background, submitted my draft, avoided eye contact. Then I saw the announcement. An informal address at the base auditorium. A special guest, retired Colonel Robert Carter. My father. I should have walked away, left the base early, but I didn't. Maybe because something in me needed to see how far he'd go. Or maybe I just didn't want to keep running. The auditorium was filled rows of young cadets in dress uniform, ranking officers from regional bases, even a few journalists from internal defense media outlets. I took a seat in the very back in civilian clothes unnoticed. Or so I thought. The lights dimmed. My father stepped onto the stage with his usual poise, one hand behind his back, the other holding a note card he wouldn't even need. He didn't speak from the heart. He never had to. Everything he said was strategy, sharpened through years of command. He started with themes of loyalty, of discipline, of legacy. The crowd responded as expected. Applause, nods, smiles. Then he shifted. There are times, he said, when individuals break the system, not because they're brave, but because they don't understand it. And those moments can destroy everything that was built to protect them. He paused, surveying the room. I once watched a cadet at West Point defy direct orders. She endangered a mission, exposed weaknesses, and walked away thinking she'd done the right thing. But let me be clear. Rogue action, no matter the outcome, is failure, because it places ego above command. His voice didn't rise, but the weight of his words hung like iron. I felt them land. Slowly, heads began to turn, a few glances in my direction. My father never said my name, but in that room he didn't have to. He was erasing me. Again. Then, a chair scraped sharply against the floor. The sound snapped the room's attention to the left aisle, where a man in fatigues rose to his feet. Sergeant John Brooks. With all due respect, Colonel, he said loud and unwavering, if you're speaking of General Sarah Carter. I have to speak up. Every breath in the room paused. Brooks turned to face the audience. His voice remained calm but resolute. I served under your command. I trained beside your peers. I know your standards. And I've seen that woman, General Carter, on the Pentagon's command list. I've seen her lead from silence from strength. You may not have said her name, sir, but we all heard what you meant, and I won't stand by and let you rewrite her story again. Silence. Total. My father's face locked in place, frozen between shock and fury. Before he could speak, another figure stepped forward from the supply team, stationed near to front Emily. She didn't say a word. She didn't even look at him. She walked steadily down the aisle and stood beside my seat. She didn't touch me. She didn't nod. She just stood, between him and me. Not behind either. It was enough. My father lowered his hand, fumbled his next sentence. Then, without finishing the speech, he left the stage. The silence didn't lift. Not until the next day when the article appeared, an anonymous blog post written by a junior staffer from an internal military publication. The headline read, "When the truth isn't in uniform, a general's silence breaks the room." It didn't name me, but it didn't have to. Within hours, the command email servers lit up with inquiries. I received a call from the Office of Strategic Security. They said my name had reached the wrong circles. My record was under review. I was to report to DC within 72 hours. The call ended without pleasantries. I sat at my desk, surrounded by the files I hadn't yet shredded, and stared at the screen. My father had tried to erase me. Again. But this time, someone else stood between me and the silence. The ride to Washington, D.C. took place in a black, unmarked vehicle. I wasn't allowed to bring personal electronics. My escort didn't speak. We arrived before dawn and drove straight into an underground lot beneath the Pentagon. I was guided through 2 checkpoints, then led to a small, windowless room marked Secure Session 14C. Set. 3 members of the National Security Oversight Board waited behind a glass barrier. Major General Margaret Hayes met me outside the door. "You still have a choice," she said. "You go in there and confirm your rank. You'll be reassigned permanently to a non-tactical position. No more operations, no more field access. You'll keep your name, but lose the work." I looked at her and said, "And if I stay silent, you go back to being a ghost." But the lie lives on. I nodded once. The hearing was brief, formal, clean. I stated my rank, General Sarah Carter, Strategic Command and Systems Integrity Division. I handed over the data packet, a secure drive containing documents collected over 7 years. Not just my own altered report, but records of at least 3 other cadets whose files were manipulated in nearly identical ways. Each case traced back to the same clearance, ID 4442 Alpha. The board listened. They asked no questions. They recorded my statement, reviewed the verification codes, then requested I step outside while they deliberated. 30 minutes later, the door opened. "You're no longer cleared for field duty," said the lead officer. "You'll serve as senior civilian advisor under the Office of Command Ethics. No public acknowledgement will be made regarding your record. No press, no medals, just official correction." I accepted. Not because I agreed, but because it was the only way to close the file on a lie that had followed me for almost a decade. As I stepped out into the hallway, the light felt sterile, distant. Emily was there, leaning against the wall. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She handed me an envelope. "I can't keep standing between the 2 of you," she said. "I need time." She turned and walked away before I could say anything. I opened the envelope later that night. Inside was a single sheet of paper, torn from a field journal. "I'm trying to understand both of you, but right now, I don't know where I stand. I'm sorry." I sat in the guest room of a safe house, 10 miles outside the city, staring at the note, not angry, not surprised. The war for truth had cost me my title, my home, my family's trust. But it gave me something I hadn't had since West Point, my name spoken without shame. I didn't wear a uniform anymore. I didn't sit at the war table. But I finally understood the one thing my father never did. Honor isn't given. It's proven, even when no one's watching. A week after the hearing, I returned to Columbus without telling anyone. I didn't want a welcome. I didn't want eyes on me. I wanted quiet. I moved back into my old college apartment on the north side of town, a narrow second-floor unit with creaky floors, yellowing blinds, and a water heater that sounded like a distant cannon when it kicked on. I had once hidden in this place after West Point, drowning in silence. But this time, I wasn't hiding. I just needed space to breathe. On the third night, my phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but I saw Emily's name. Her voice came fast, a little breathless. "Do you still have the Porter data?" I sat up straighter. "Yes." "Why, there's a pattern. It's not just you. I'm tracing multiple report inconsistencies, same signature behavior, same ID trail. I think it goes deeper." "Can I meet you?" I asked. "What are you doing?" "Emily." She paused, then said, "Trying to figure out if everything I believed growing up was a lie. Just give me the chance to find out." We met the next day in D.C. She flew in early and came straight from the airport to a diner near DuPont Circle. We didn't talk about Dad. We didn't talk about the house. We talked about data points, command overrides, clearance breaches. We talked like two officers, two people who knew how dangerous buried truth could become. I reactivated my encrypted channel with James Porter. Within hours, he uploaded a backup archive, 17 cases of altered cadet records over the past decade, 6 of which were directly linked to my father's clearance ID. Emily scrolled through the files silently. The light from the screen made her eyes shimmer, but she didn't cry. When she looked at me again, she said, "I think we need to show this to someone." We didn't rush. We documented everything, carefully routed packets to oversight through a protected delivery chain. Then, on a quiet Sunday morning, Emily arranged a meeting I never thought would happen. Mom opened the front door slowly. Her hair had more gray than I remembered. She didn't hug me. She didn't ask why I had come. She simply asked, "Are you happy?" It caught me off guard. I didn't have an answer. I handed her a manila envelope with a copy of the hearing report and the official statement from the security board. She sat with it in her lap, thumbing the edge. After a long pause, she reached out and placed her hand on my shoulder. "I should have asked more questions," she said. "I should have stood up for you." We sat in silence. No judgment, no fixing the past. But it was something. 2 days later, Emily and I drove out to a property on the outskirts of town, a small, quiet farm with overgrown fences and an abandoned tractor leaning against the barn. Dad had bought it after retiring, hoping, I suppose, to escape the weight of his own legacy. He opened the door before we knocked. "I figured you'd come," he said. No anger, no bravado, just age. He let us in. The living room was sparse. He offered no seats. Instead, he walked to a low cabinet, opened it, and pulled out a small wooden box. Without speaking, he placed it on the table between us and opened the lid. Inside was the original West Point incident report, untouched, unsigned, no edits, no notes. He looked at me and said, "I kept it." I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to believe I hadn't really erased you. Then, after a moment, he added, "I was wrong. I thought legacy mattered more than truth. I don't believe that anymore." There was no apology. But there was something else. A quiet surrender. A man finally standing before what he couldn't outrun. We left without shaking hands. But as I stepped off the porch, I glanced back and saw him watch me. And for once, he wasn't looking through me. He was seeing me. That was enough. I didn't walk away angry. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt lighter. I had come for the truth, and I had left with a piece of myself I thought I'd lost. 2 months passed. The world didn't change, but mine did. Emily and I were now part of a new unit under civilian military oversight, one built to review, investigate, and correct inconsistencies in training records and internal justice systems. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't loud, but it was necessary. I no longer carried the title of general on paper. My official capacity was listed as Civilian Systems Advisor. No uniform, no bars. But I still carried the weight of leadership, and this time, without needing anyone's permission. I moved into a quiet apartment near Franklin Park, just a few blocks from the elementary school Emily and I had attended as kids. Most mornings I walked past the grassy field where we used to play two girls in hand-me-down boots pretending we were soldiers. One afternoon in October, Emily stopped by unannounced. She handed me a small silver box. Inside was a flat polished pin, an eagle etched in dark steel, with one phrase beneath. Truth is honor. I didn't put it on. I slipped it into the inside pocket of my coat. Not because I was ashamed, but because I no longer needed anything shiny to tell me who I was. That pin wasn't for a show. It was a promise to myself and to her. That evening, as the sun dropped behind the trees, I left a note in Emily's locker at our shared office. It read, "We don't need medals to know who we are. Thank you for choosing the truth." No name. She'd know it was from me. I didn't need anyone to salute me. Didn't need to hear General whispered in awe. I just needed someone to say my name without shame and mean it. And now, I had that. The story was never about revenge. It wasn't even about redemption. It was about reclaiming something simple, something sacred, the right to be seen, the right to speak, the right to be loved without conditions. I no longer sit alone on a folding chair beside a propane grill. I sit in sunlight beside the sister who once believed I had failed her. Now she calls me her ally. And for the first time in years, I don't feel like I have to fight anymore. I finally feel like I can live. Sometimes the strongest victories are the quiet ones, the battles we win within ourselves. When we choose truth over silence, purpose over pride, healing over bitterness. Honor isn't given, it's lived. And sometimes, the most powerful rank we can hold is simply being whole. If this story moved you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment, subscribe, or share it. Means more than you know. Thank you for listening.